The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 114. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome back to our last show in June. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It's that quiet time of year in Ann Arbor. We're 70-some-odd days from the start of football season. Next month, the preseason magazines will hit the stand, and in August, two-a-days get underway. I thought today would be a good time to take a look back at some of the top Wolverine stories from the spring, and even look ahead just a bit to this coming football season. To do that, we'll be joined today on our Michigan Insider segment by Sean Yuille, managing editor of SB Nation Detroit. Before we get to that, let's kick it off as we always do with our view from Section 17, a quick look at headlines of interest to Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Sad news last week from Ann Arbor. Michigan football legend Bob Chappius passed away following complications as a result of a fall in his home. Still a Big Ten record holder in many categories, Chappius was considered one of the early passing specialists in college football. Our deepest sympathy to his wife Ann and his 4 children who were with him at the time of his passing. On a happier note, 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year and All-American Amanda Chittister has been named to the 17-player U.S. national softball team. Amanda will join forces with her former Wolverine teammate, pitcher Jordan Taylor. Last week, the NCAA announced that 4 U of M teams received Academic Public Recognition Awards for the past academic year. To achieve this recognition, a team must record an overall GPA among the top 10% of their respective sport. We'll have more on this and our other headline stories coming up later on Wolverine Quick Hits. Up next is our Michigan Insider segment. Our guest today is SB Nation Detroit managing editor Sean Yuille. We'll discuss some of the big stories in Michigan athletics from the spring and take a quick look forward to this coming football season. That's next right here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Joining us today on our Michigan Insider segment is managing editor at SB Nation Detroit, Sean Yuille, a familiar guest. Sean, welcome back to the show.
Thanks again for having me.
Well, Sean, it's that time of the year. It's late June. All of the hype starts in July, so we've got a couple of weeks for that, and then in earnest in August. So I thought it would be nice to have Sean on the show and take a look back at some of the big topics, main stories in the Michigan athletic program from the past couple of months. Sean, let's start with the hiring of Kim Barnes-Arico as the new women's head basketball coach. At least for right now, this looks like a great hire for Dave Brandon. I mean, she hasn't coached a game at Michigan yet, but on the face of it, coming from a great program like St. John's, this looks like a real winner.
Yeah, and when the coaching job initially opened up, it was sort of just something that really came out of left field because the team finally got back to the tournament for the first time under Kevin Borseth. And so the thinking was they finally took that big step, got over that hump that they weren't able to in the first few years he was there, and they were ready to go forward with him. But then he resigned suddenly because apparently he didn't want to coach in the Big Ten anymore, and despite all the upgrades that Michigan had coming, he just didn't want to be part of a big-time program. So Dave Brandon was sort of left scrambling initially, it looked like, but he ended up making a really solid hire and going out and getting somebody from the Big East, which is really consistently the top basketball conference for women's basketball and men's, but especially in women's. And you get somebody that went into UConn last year and ended their home winning streak, somebody who was the winningest coach in their program's history. And it's a little surprising she actually left St. John's. Maybe going to a conference like the Big Ten where you don't have UConn hanging over your shoulder every step of the way is an upgrade for her, and it seems like an upgrade for Michigan.
You're right. I had Coach Barnes on the show a couple of weeks ago. That was one of the questions that I asked her, too. I mean, they are loaded for this year. They're going to be a consensus top 10, maybe even top 5 programs. But what do you think she has to do to take this program to the next level, a level that Coach Borseth seemed to be heading toward, but just not there yet?
Well, I think first and foremost, it has to be consistent tournament appearances. And we've sort of seen this with the men's program in John Beeline, where slowly but surely they make their way into the tournament, but then they drop out the next year and they're not as good, and then they return a year after, and now a Big Ten title. I mean, it's a slow build toward being a consistent winner. And I think for the women's program, first and foremost, you just need to make common appearances in the NCAA tournament, and then you start worrying about competing for Big Ten titles and becoming a big-time recruiting program, and just building your brand, as Dave Brandon would like to say, as a contender year in and year out. And when the program went through that big drought for tournament appearances before Borseth was there and then while he was there for the first few years, it was just sort of seen as a program that was really in the cellar of the Big Ten. And now you sort of get out of that by making the NCAA tournament, but it's going to be important to continue to make the NCAA tournament, especially with Michigan State having a consistently good program just down the road.
Do you think Coach Arico is finally going to be that coach that gets the program to elite status?
I think it's a combination of things. I think having a great coach like her is certainly one of the biggest parts of it, but also the fact that Chrysler Arena is going to be completely renovated before she starts coaching in her first game, and then you have the practice facility, which came in just before she got here. I mean, those two are just huge factors in the success of the program for both men's and women's. And we've seen Michigan's men's recruiting really pick up in the right direction the last few years. And it wasn't just because of facilities, obviously, but that was a big deal in getting the program sort of modernized. And so I think Kim Marzarica will certainly be the most important part in taking them to the next step. But it helps that you actually have an athletic department putting money into the basketball program and their facilities for once. So
we'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out in the fall, but it just sure looks good. Let's switch gears if we could and talk Michigan softball and Coach Carol Hutchins for just a moment, Sean. This team had another great year. We just get used to it. It's year after year, better than expected this year with 2 freshman pitchers. Talk about what a fantastic job Coach Hutchins does year in and year out with this program.
It seems like no matter what happens in Michigan sports, there's always one reliable team, and it's the softball program. And with Carol Hutchins leading the way, year in and year out, they're always in the NCAA tournament. They're always seemingly winning the Big Ten title, and they're always competing for a spot in the College World Series. And although they fell short this year, like you said, they went far beyond expectations at the start of the season, where this was seen as more of a rebuilding year after losing some really important players from last year's team. And then what do they end up doing? They make it all the way to the Super Regional, and then they lose in SEC territory to the eventual champion. So there's nothing to be ashamed of for that, certainly. And it's just another year where the softball team showed that they are among the very best in the Big Ten and the nation. And for a team in the North to do that consistently, it just says a lot about the program Carol Hutchins has put together, because as we'll probably talk about in a bit, the baseball program saw that consistent winning for a couple of years, and then they just fell off. So for Hutchins to keep it consistent every year is really impressive.
Well, Sean, do you think that Coach Hutchins is underappreciated, or is it just that softball flies under the radar in the big picture of Michigan athletics?
I think it's more about softball just flying under the radar, because, I mean, football and basketball are the 2 top dogs in college sports, and then regionally it depends on what conference you play in. In the SEC, baseball and softball are definitely 3 and 4, whereas in the Big Ten, you have hockey right there, and then maybe it gets to softball and baseball. And so I think that has a lot more to do with it than anything else. But there's no doubt she's underappreciated just because what she's done year in and year out. I mean, she's sort of like Red Berenson in that regard, where she's built a program, and every year they're winners, no matter what's happened to their team.
Well, it's the premier softball program in the East and Midwest, the North, I guess we could say. You look at the record, it just blows your mind when you see what she's accomplished at Michigan.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, in the Midwest, it's really tough to compete on a national basis just because you're spent traveling the first month or 2 of the season down south, and then you have to come back during the week for classes and head out on weekends to play in these tournaments and stuff. And then you also don't have the advantage of training outside and practicing all year like a team in the South might do. So for Michigan to continue to be such a great program just says a lot about what Carol Hutchins has done. And it says a lot about what Michigan has done as a softball program in general with all the improvements they've made after that national title victory in 2005.
Well, absolutely. I agree with you on that. Turning to baseball for a minute, as we alluded to a few moments ago, were you surprised that Coach Maloney and the university parted ways after the season?
It really didn't come as a big surprise. I mean, with what has happened the past few seasons, it really just seemed like an inevitable thing to happen. And I know they said that they just decided to part ways because his contract was up, but you can bet it was a decision on Michigan's part to make a change. And it was probably the right move. I mean, Maloney had put together an incredible program, and his run through the NCAA tournament, especially in the mid-2000s when they went to Vanderbilt and beat them with David Price pitching. I mean, it was just an incredible run for that team, and especially as a team from the Big Ten, because in college baseball, it's even harder to compete as a Big Ten team, as we've seen in recent years, where it's usually a one-team or a one-bid league for the NCAA tournament. This year they got two with Michigan State grabbing an at-large bid. But it just shows how hard it is to compete. And despite having that high level of success during the mid-2000s, it just sort of really fell apart in the last few years. And I know there was a really good post on MGO blog by Brian Cook a couple of weeks ago after Maloney departed, and it sort of showed what happened, and it was the departure of Jake Voss, who is now the coach of Michigan State, and recruiting just sort of fell off. And I think now you're starting to see the effects of that because Michigan just hasn't been able to win. And, I mean, to be at the bottom of the Big Ten, it was probably the right move to make a change and hope that somebody else can come in and get the program turned back in the right direction.
Are there any candidates for the job whose name have surfaced yet?
Well, the only one that I've heard even mentioned, and I don't think it's because Michigan has necessarily reached out to him, is the head coach of Kent State, which is currently playing in the College World Series. I mean, that's just something that was brought up because he's from the Midwest. He coaches for a MAC team and has put together an incredible program there. And like I said, they're in the World Series. So to take a MAC team that far is really impressive. And I mean, I would imagine he'd be a good fit at Michigan. But then again, if you continue waiting for somebody like that, then there was a college baseball writer that brought it up. As long as Michigan's job is open, Michigan State continues to pull away in recruiting. So there's always that to think about as well.
Do you think that the program, with the right hire, can regain elite Big Ten status?
Yeah, I think if the right guy comes in, just like what happened with Michigan State, you can get to the point where they're competing for regular season Big Ten titles, and then once you get to the Big Ten tournament, it's just a matter of putting together a strong week of baseball and making it back to the NCAA tournament. Now, anything beyond the Big Ten is going to be a lot to ask of any Big Ten team just because of the landscape of college baseball. And I know there's been talk amongst the athletic directors of possibly breaking out from the NCAA and just competing in the summer and the fall when the weather's actually nice here in the Midwest, or doing something where they can shift part of their schedule to the fall so there's more of a level playing ground. But as long as the season is strictly in the spring, I don't think the Big Ten is really going to make that much of a dent on the national stage.
Sean, let's turn our attention, last topic here today, about football season. It's 75 days away as we record this interview. The hype for the season will get underway in earnest in just a couple of weeks with all of the preseason magazines coming out. Do you think the high expectations for this team are, right now grounded in any kind of reality?
Yeah, I think now that Michigan has gotten back to the point where they're going to a BCS Bowl, winning 11 games, it's back to the nature of every Michigan fan to just have really high expectations, and even people outside of the program to have high expectations. And when Lloyd Carr was here in his last few seasons, it was seemingly win a national title or bust, especially when we made a few Rose Bowl appearances in a span of 4 years. And so there was that 2005 where we went 7-5, and everybody was just like, the sky is falling, what is going on? And then, of course, we rebound with going 11-2. And then 2007, Lloyd Carr's last year, it was the same thing. Top 5 nationally with all of the seniors back who contributed on that 2006 team. And the thinking was, okay, this is another national title or bust year. And then, of course, they busted with the first 2 games, which I don't even want to talk about. But And then we shifted into Rich Rod. When the first year he was there, the expectations were sort of where nobody was clear. Like, we think we could be good, but first year with the growing pains, what will it be? And then end up going 3-9, which was just a big surprise to a lot of people with how bad it was. And then 2009, the same thing. You think they'll be better, but then they don't quite get there. They go 5-7. And in his final season, they certainly improved with wins and losses, but the defense continued to take a step in the wrong direction. And so expectations week in and week out were that it'd be a high-scoring game and maybe we'll win. And now with Brady Hoke and Greg Madison and now Borges leading the way, it's back to that nature from the Lloyd Carr days where you're expecting this team to go out and win 10 or 11 games each year. And no matter how hard the schedule is this season, it's sort of the same thing. A lot of people nationally are expecting this to be a top 10 team, and even if they don't end up winning 10 games, they think they'll be a lot better. So there's definitely an increase in expectations, but that's how it should be at a program like Michigan, where you're competing among the very best in college football, and you're expecting to win a Big Ten title and a national title. So I think that's a good thing because it's certainly more fun than expecting to lose every year.
Yeah, you got that right. Sean, we heard a lot of talk last year that the quarterbacks in Coach Borges' system make a great stride or strides in their second year of running his offense, even though it's not really in its purest form the type of a pro style he wants to run this year. Do you still think that Denard will become that game in and game out efficient passing threat?
I don't know if he'll be somebody that you can look to every single week and say he'll play like he did against Ohio State, or he'll play like he did against Nebraska, where he's completing most of his passes, making really good reads for when to run. But I do think he'll be much better when it comes to turnovers, and that was the biggest issue last year. He threw a ton of interceptions, fumbled the ball some as well. And I think that's where the improvement from year 1 to year 2 under Borges will be most noticeable. Maybe not as much in terms of yards or touchdowns, but when it comes to being a more efficient passer, not turning the ball over, I think that just comes along with being more experienced in the system, making better reads, and in general not taking as many chances, which he might have felt he had to do in the first year under Borges. Plus, now that Borges has a much better idea of what kind of offense he wants to run, you're not going to see what happened at the start of last season where he was going back and forth between lining up under center for quite a bit during one game and then going all shotgun and just back and forth. And I think that really hurt Denard's development in 2011. But this year, it's pretty clear what the right move is. Just stay out of center with the shotgun formation. And if you sprinkle the I formation in every now and then, that won't be bad. But it's best for Denard, and I think it'll help Denard a lot in his second season under Al Borges.
Oh, I have to agree. One of the things that Coach Borges said in the presser after the spring scrimmage, when asked about Denard, he said he's much more comfortable back there this spring, and he is seeing the field. That tells me that Coach Borges is seeing that maturation. He's seeing what he's seen in some of his other quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to the interception problem. A lot of times last year he sort of just felt rushed and decided instead of running it, which would probably be the better move considering how fast he is, he just heaved it downfield. And although Junior Hemingway bailed him out quite a bit, especially against Notre Dame and in the Sugar Bowl, a lot of times it didn't happen that way, and he ended up turning the ball over, and that just ended up being a big problem. And look at the Michigan State game at the very end. They need one touchdown to come back and tie the game. Denard's under pressure, and instead of running the ball or throwing it right to a defender for a pick six. And I think that type of stuff will be eliminated or at least happen a lot less in this upcoming season, just because, like you said, he's able to see the field, read the defense much better, and in general feel a lot more comfortable now that he knows what the offense is all about, and they're not trying to make it up as they go.
Are you concerned, though, about the defense coming into the season, specifically the defensive line?
The defensive line does concern me, just because you lose two outstanding players in Mike Martin and Ryan Van Bergen, and another contributor in Will Heiniger, who really seemed to be overlooked quite a bit, but he was a solid player on the defensive line. And so you're replacing pretty much the entire line, save Craig Rowe, and you're not only going to have a lot of inexperience, but you might even end up playing a true freshman like Andre Pipkins. And if there was a grace period sort of for these new players to get their feet and get used to playing in Division I college football, I wouldn't be nearly as concerned. But the fact that you're opening the season against Alabama, which is pretty much the closest thing to an NFL team as you can get in college football, it's just a little concerning considering how good their offensive line is and how bad the defensive line may be early on, just because they aren't used to playing and there is a lot of inexperience.
Well, on that defensive side, though, other than the defensive front, I mean, the linebacking core is looking solid, and the secondary, for the first time in quite a long time, really looks pretty steady.
Yeah, and that's the flip side of it. We finally have some consistency in the back seven, and hopefully that will be able to cover up for the inexperience of the front four. And like you said, cornerbacks and safeties, this is I can't even remember the last time I felt this good about the secondary. So that says a lot, especially coming from the days of Ray Vinopol and these other guys just getting completely burned on a daily basis under Rich Rod. And then you have consistency with Blake Countess, J.T. Floyd, Jordan Kovacs, Thomas Gordon. There's just a lot of talent, and there's a lot of talent coming in as well. So hopefully this will be a situation where they become a strength and some of the other weaknesses on defense get overshadowed a little bit.
Well, Sean, last question. When it's all said and done at the end of November on Thanksgiving weekend, do you think we're going to see Michigan with a chance to be in that Big Ten championship game in December?
I do, and part of it comes down to the fact that the division Michigan plays in, you have Michigan and Michigan State, Nebraska and Iowa seemingly competing for that one spot in the Big Ten title game. And just based on what happened last season and based on what I think will happen this upcoming season, to me, October, at the end of that month, with Michigan versus Michigan State, I think that will be the game that ultimately decides the Big Ten championship representative from that division. And if Michigan wins it, then they hold that tiebreaker. You might get some breathing room once you head into the Ohio State weekend at the end of November. And either way, if you're able to beat Ohio State to clinch a spot in Indy, that'd be quite the way to end the second season under Brady Hoke, quite the way to end Urban Meyer's first season at Ohio State.
That game in October against Michigan State, how big is that game going to be?
To me, it's the biggest game this season, bar none. And I know there's a lot of talk about the next 10-year war with Brady Hoke and Urban Meyer being at Ohio State now and all the recruiting battles that go on between them. But to me, it's more important this season to be victorious over Michigan State, not just because you need to stop a 5-year winning streak from happening, which would just be amazing in and of itself, but you also need to make a statement on the field that you can beat these guys, because off the field, there's no doubt Michigan is cleaning up on the recruiting trail, especially with Michigan State. But on the field, you need to have something to show for it. And I know their current recruiting classes won't make an impact until 2 or 3 years down the road, but just for the state of the program, you need to beat Michigan State and not necessarily put them back in their place, but Mark D'Antonio does seem to be enjoying this a little too much. So take it down a notch, or as he'd like to say, the pride comes before the fall. So I think it's time for the fall for Michigan State. We've
covered a lot of ground today, Sean. Of course, as I said, it's the end of June. We have July coming up. The hype is going to start cranking up for the season then in August. So we hope to get you back on the show as we get closer to the season and take a closer look at what to expect this year. Our guest today has been Sean Yuille, managing editor at SB Nation Detroit. And as always, Sean, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks again to our guest today, Sean Yuille, managing editor at SB Nation Detroit. You can follow Sean and his fine staff at www.sbnationdetroit.com. Coming up next, we wrap it up for today's show on Wolverine Quick Hits, right here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, former University of Michigan football All-American Bob Chappius passed away late last Thursday, June 14th, at the age of 89. Chappius was hospitalized after a fall earlier last week and died at the U of M hospital, surrounded by his wife Ann and their 4 children. Chappius, who was also a 2-year letterman in baseball for the Wolverines, was elected to the College Football Hall of Fame in 1988 and was inducted into the Michigan Hall of Honor in 1984. Chappius played football for the Wolverines in 1942, before his career was interrupted by World War II. As an aerial gunner and radio operator on B-25 bombers during the war, Chappius was shot down over Italy on his 21st mission. He was rescued by an Italian partisan and remained in Italy until the end of the war, evading German soldiers in a series of thrilling adventures. A triple threat back, he resumed his Michigan playing career after the war in 1946. Chappius became one of the greatest backs in college football during the 1947 season. He earned unanimous first-team All-America honors and finished second in the Heisman Trophy balloting. Chappius led the 1947 Michigan squad, known as the Mad Magicians, to an undefeated season and the national title. Chappius ended his Michigan football career as the 1948 Rose Bowl MVP, setting 2 records for total offense and pass completions in a 49-0 victory over Southern Cal. Chappius was inducted into the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame in 1992. He continues to hold the Big Ten Conference single-season passer rating record, 175.3, and the U of M season mark for yards per completion, 18.8 average. Chappius led the Wolverines in passing and total offense in 1946 and 1947, receiving all Big Ten honors both seasons. He was regarded as one of the early passing specialists in college football. In a 2-year professional career with the All-America Football Conference, Chappius was the starting quarterback for the Brooklyn Dodgers and Chicago Hornets in 1948 and 1949. He retired from football in 1950 when the league folded. Chappius entered the business sector and was a successful labor relations director. He is scheduled to be inducted into the State of Michigan Sports Hall of Fame this fall. Former University of Michigan softball player Amanda Chittister was one of 5 athletes added to the 2012 USA Softball Women's National Team following a June 10th through 12th selection camp. She joins former Wolverine Jordan Taylor on the 17-player roster. Chittister recently capped her stellar career at Michigan, helping the Wolverines to 4 consecutive Big Ten championships during her tenure. She was named Big Ten Player of the Year in both 2011 and 2012 and earned NFCA All-America honors in 2009 and 2011. Chittister finished her career ranked second in school history in runs batted in, 200, second in Grand Slams, 5, fourth in slugging percentage, 596, fifth in home runs, 40, ninth in hits, 248, and 10th in runs scored, 157. Chittister is the 3rd Wolverine to earn a spot on the national team, joining Taylor and Jenny Ritter. With Chittister and Taylor on this year's squad, it's the first time the 2 Wolverines are on the same team. The U.S. national team will compete in 6 events this summer, culminating with the International Softball Federation, ICF, Women's World Championship, July 13th through the 22nd in Whitehorse, Yukon, Canada. So congratulations to Amanda Chittister from right here in Allen Park, Michigan, a graduate of St. Francis Cabrini High School, where she led them to 2 consecutive state championships. And in a final note, on Thursday, June 14th, the NCAA announced its 2010-11 Division I Academic Performance Program Public Recognition Award recipients, which included 4 University of Michigan varsity athletic teams, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's tennis, and women's tennis. The award recognizes teams among the top 10% of their respective sports in the most recent Multi-Year Academic Progress Rate, APR, report. Each year, the NCAA honors selected Division I sports teams who achieve the top APR within their sport by publicly recognizing their latest multi-year rate. This announcement is part of the overall Division I academic reform effort. The APR provides a real-time look at a team's academic success each semester by tracking the academic progress of individual student-athletes on scholarship. The APR accounts for eligibility, retention, and graduation, and provides a measure of each team's academic performance. Congratulations to those 4 U of M athletic teams for their Academic Public Recognition Award. Don't forget to become a member here at GBMW. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership. Benefits include daily email reminders when a story is published or a mailbag question is answered. You also need to become a member for full participation on our always interesting message board. As a member here on GBMW, you can also take part in our popular Monday Night Live chat with E-Rock Wolverine, Coach BT, Maze Man, Doc for Blue, World's Wolverine, and our very own hockey guru, Yoastmeister. The Monday Night Live chat is taking a summer vacation, but will return in August when fall practice begins. So join GBMW today and get your daily Maize and Blue fix of news and conversation. Right now we're busy with our player profiles for the upcoming season, so check that out. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Then each Wednesday you can listen to the Michigan Man Podcast. The show is now available as an Android app, which can be purchased from the Android App Store at Amazon.com. If you are an Apple person, you'll find our app in the iTunes App Store. If you listen to the show on your Apple device, please take a minute to give the show a review. It does help a lot. Our listener lines are open 24/7. If you would like to call and leave a comment we can use on an upcoming show, our number is 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Whatever's on your mind, football, basketball, recruiting, hockey, just give us a call, state your name, tell us where you're calling from, and then let it rip. If you would rather not leave a voicemail but still have a comment or suggestion for the show, just email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. I welcome your thoughts and opinions on anything Maize and Blue, and you'll find our contact information again on our show notes page. Thanks again to our guest today, managing editor of the fine blog SB Nation Detroit, Sean Yuille. Follow Sean and his fine staff at www.sbnationdetroit.com. Through July, we'll be on our summer broadcast schedule of 2 shows per month, so we are not going away, just slowing down to enjoy the summer a bit. Weekly programming will resume in August as we get ramped up for the upcoming football season. Our next show will air on Wednesday, July 4th, so in the midst of your busy holiday and summer schedule, don't forget to download the show and take us with you on your summer travels. Thanks again to all of our listeners around the country, and especially to our servicemen and women in Afghanistan who listen to the show via the Armed Forces Services Network. We appreciate the kind words you send to us and are pleased to be able to bring you news of your Wolverines wherever you are. Don't forget to tell your friends about the show, and again, if you listen to the program on iTunes, please give us a review. So until Wednesday, July 4th, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!